Cowboy saw Apache bury a secret box, and what rose from the sand forced him to kneel. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Jack Thornton, a lone cowboy, rode his horse across the scorching desert. The sun beat down relentlessly, casting long shadows on the rocky terrain. For years, Jack had lived a quiet life on his ranch, far from the bustling towns and people. He cherished the solitude, his days filled with the hum of the wind and the company of his cattle. The land was harsh, but it was home. He had no interest in the politics of the world outside his gate. His life was simple and uncomplicated, or so he thought. One day, while riding along the edge of the desert, Jack noticed something strange. At first, he thought it was just the heat playing tricks on his eyes, but as he drew closer, he could see it clearly. A figure, moving swiftly in the distance. It was a man, an Apache, dressed in traditional attire, walking through the sand with a purpose. Jack's curiosity piqued. He had seen Apaches before, but this one seemed different. The Apache was carrying something, a small box wrapped in cloth, his movements careful, almost reverent. Jack watched from a distance, unsure of what to do. Should he approach? Was the man in need of help? Or was he simply passing through, unaware of Jack's presence? But then, without warning, the Apache stopped. He knelt down in the sand, carefully digging a small hole with his hands. Jack's heart raced. What was he doing? The man buried the box with great care, as if it were a sacred item. Then, he stood, brushed the sand off his hands, and walked away, disappearing into the horizon. Jack remained frozen, watching the spot where the man had buried the box. His mind raced with questions. Why had the Apache buried the box? What could be inside? The land felt still, but something stirred in Jack's gut. He knew he couldn't let this mystery go unsolved. He dismounted from his horse and approached the spot carefully, his boots crunching the dry sand beneath him. Kneeling down, Jack began to dig, the heat of the day bearing down on him, but he didn't care. His fingers scraped against something hard. The box. He pulled it out slowly, his hands trembling with anticipation. As he lifted it from the sand, something caught his eye. In the distance, the wind stirred the dust, and in the swirling haze he saw movement. A figure was approaching, quickly and purposefully. It was the Apache from before. And this time, Jack's actions had consequences. As the man drew closer, he saw Jack holding the box. His eyes widened, and a deep tension filled the air. Jack could feel it, the weight of the moment. The man stopped in his tracks, his face hardening. Jack stood frozen, the box in his hands, his heart pounding. It was too late to put it back. The Apache took a step forward, and without saying a word, he nodded to Jack. The cowboy, still holding the box, did the only thing he could. He knelt, compelled by something he couldn't quite explain, as the Apache's gaze bore into him. Jack felt the weight of the moment press down on him. He had always prided himself on his ability to stay calm, to think things through before acting, but now, with the box in his hands and the Apache standing before him, his mind was clouded. The man did not speak, his gaze fixed intently on Jack. The air between them crackled with an unspoken tension, something deeper than the mere curiosity of a man finding something he should not have. Jack's heart raced as he knelt in the sand, still holding the box. He had not meant to take it, he had simply been following his instincts. Yet now that he had it, he realized that it was no longer just a box buried in the desert. It was something that had clearly been meant for someone else. Something important. The Apache man stepped forward, his presence imposing yet silent. Jack felt a strange sense of being judged, not for his actions, but for who he was. He was a cowboy, an outsider in this land of secrets and ancient customs. He had never been a part of the Apache world, but now, It seemed as though that world had come to him. The man's eyes softened, just a little, as if assessing Jack's worth. Then, without a word, he turned and motioned for Jack to follow him. Jack hesitated for only a moment before standing up and brushing the sand from his pants. His hand still clenched around the box, but he knew there was no turning back now. He could not simply leave the Apache man here, alone with his secrets. Jack followed, keeping a respectful distance behind the Apache. The man's movements were steady, deliberate, as though he had already accepted the course of this encounter. They walked in silence, the only sound being the crunch of their boots against the dry desert floor. As they approached the edge of a rocky outcrop, the Apache stopped and turned to Jack. His voice, when it came, was low, measured. "You are not of my people," he said, his tone calm but firm. Jack nodded, unsure of how to respond. The Apache continued. "But you have touched something that was not meant for you. Something sacred. This box, it holds a promise." Jack's confusion deepened, but he remained silent, listening carefully. The Apache's gaze turned distant, as if lost in thought. "It is a gift, a burden. One that must be protected." Jack felt a shiver run through him. He could sense the gravity of what the man was saying, but the meaning remained elusive. "You must understand," the Apache continued. "This is not just a treasure or a secret, it is a bond between our people and the land. A bond that cannot be broken, not even by someone like you." Jack's mind raced. What had he stumbled upon? The box seemed so ordinary, so insignificant in its simple appearance, yet it was clear that its contents were anything but. "What is in it?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Apache met his gaze, and for a moment Jack saw something in his eyes, a deep, ancient wisdom, and perhaps even a hint of sadness. "You will see," he said softly. "But only if you are worthy." Jack swallowed hard. What did that mean? Worthy? He wasn't sure what the man was asking of him, but he could feel the weight of the situation settling deeper. The Apache turned and started walking again, this time towards a narrow pass between two jagged rocks. Jack followed, his mind filled with questions he didn't know how to ask. As they reached the pass, the Apache man stopped once more, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The air seemed to grow thicker, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. "You must understand," the Apache said, turning back to Jack, "that the path ahead is not one you can walk alone." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. What was this man trying to tell him? What had he gotten himself into? As the Apache spoke, Jack realized that this moment would change everything. It wasn't just about the box anymore. It was about something much larger, something that tied him to this land, to its people, to a past he had never known. And now, there was no turning back. The Apache man led Jack through the narrow pass, the air thick with the scent of sage and dry earth. The walls of stone rose on either side, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist in the setting sun. Jack's mind raced, still trying to piece together the meaning of the strange encounter. The box, the man's cryptic words, the feeling that something much larger was unfolding, everything seemed to be pushing him toward a truth he wasn't yet ready to understand. As they reached the end of the pass, the Apache stopped once more, his gaze sweeping over the horizon. Jack followed his eyes, his heart skipping a beat. In front of them was a hidden valley, nestled deep within the mountains. The land was lush and green, a stark contrast to the desert they had just crossed. It seemed untouched, wild, and sacred. Jack felt a shiver run through him. "This is where it begins," the Apache said, his voice low and steady. "This is the heart of our people." Jack stood still, absorbing the sight before him. He could feel the weight of the land, the history that seemed to pulse beneath the earth. He had always thought of the desert as barren, but now he saw it differently. It was full of life, full of stories. The Apache man turned to him. "You are here because you are needed. But you must prove yourself worthy." Jack's confusion deepened. Prove himself worthy? He had no idea what the man meant, but the seriousness in his tone left no room for doubt. "What do you mean?" Jack asked. The Apache's eyes met his. There are forces at work, things you cannot yet see. But they will come. And when they do, you will need to be ready. Jack felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Forces at work? What was he talking about? He had no interest in politics, no interest in anything beyond his ranch. Yet here he was, standing in a hidden valley with an Apache who spoke of things far beyond Jack's understanding. What is in the box? Jack asked, his voice almost a whisper. The Apache man reached into his pouch and pulled out a small leather satchel. He opened it carefully, revealing an ancient map. Jack's eyes widened. The map was old, its edges frayed and worn, but the markings on it were clear. This map, the Apache said, is the key to what is coming. You must protect it. Jack didn't know what to say. A map? It seemed so simple, yet the weight of the Apache's words pressed heavily on him. Who am I protecting it from? Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Apache's expression grew hard. There are those who would destroy everything for the sake of power, he said. And there are those who would give everything to keep it safe. You will have to choose a side. Jack's mind reeled. Choose a side? He had never been part of any fight, never wanted to be. But now, standing in this hidden valley, with the map in his hands, he felt a sense of responsibility he had never known before. The Apache stepped back, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Jack. You have the map now, he said. But you must keep it safe. Trust no one. Jack nodded, his grip tightening on the map. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but one thing was clear: his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The Apache turned and began walking away, his footsteps silent on the soft earth. Jack stood there for a moment longer, the weight of the map pressing into his palm. He had no idea what to do next, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't go back to his old life. The desert, the ranch, the quiet life he had lived, it was all behind him now. As the Apache disappeared into the distance, Jack felt a sense of resolve settle over him. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it. Whatever it was, he would stand his ground. He would protect the map. And he would protect the people who had trusted him with it. Jack stood at the edge of the hidden valley, the weight of the map heavy in his hands. The Apache man had disappeared into the distance, leaving Jack with a sense of urgency he couldn't shake. He looked around, the vastness of the land stretching out before him. The setting sun cast long shadows across the valley, painting the landscape in hues of orange and red. The silence was profound, but Jack's mind was far from still. He couldn't help but think of the path he had been thrust onto. The Apache's words echoed in his mind. You must protect it. He didn't understand what it all meant, but there was no going back now. He had seen something, held something that wasn't meant for him, and now the weight of responsibility hung over him. He turned and started walking toward the distant hills, his steps slow, deliberate. The map, still folded in his hand, felt like a beacon drawing him forward. The only thing he knew for sure was that he couldn't keep it on his own. He needed help, someone he could trust. But who could he trust? His mind drifted back to the day he had met the Apache man. They had spoken little, but Jack had felt an undeniable pull, a bond formed in the quiet of the desert. Was that what the man meant? That he had to trust those who understood the land, the ways of his people? He had no answers, but he knew he couldn't ignore the gravity of what he had been entrusted with. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Jack couldn't afford to hesitate. As he climbed the ridge that led out of the valley, the last light of day dimmed, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The cool night air rushed in, carrying with it the sounds of the land, whispers of wind through the trees, the soft rustling of leaves. Jack paused for a moment, taking it all in. It was as if the land itself was calling to him, urging him onward. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a deep connection to it, something primal, something that went beyond the cattle he had tended or the desert he had roamed. This place was different, and it was part of him now, just as much as he was part of it. The thought of returning to his old life felt impossible. He had left that man behind, the one who had walked alone for so many years, content to fade into the landscape. Now, he was someone else, someone with a purpose that came with dangers he could not foresee. The path ahead was filled with uncertainty, but Jack knew one thing for certain: he was no longer just a cowboy. As he reached the top of the ridge, the valley below seemed to open up, a vast expanse waiting for him to navigate. And in the distance he saw it, the flickering lights of a campfire. He wasn't alone anymore. There was a new chapter waiting for him, one he could not turn away from. Jack's steps quickened as he moved toward the fire. Whoever was there, he would have to trust them. He had no choice. The choices made for him were no longer his to make alone. The man who had once sought solitude now sought answers. And as the warmth of the fire grew closer, Jack felt that the answers were within his reach, just beyond the next horizon. As Jack approached the campfire, the flickering light revealed a small group of people sitting around it. A few faces turned toward him as he neared, their expressions unreadable in the dim glow. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect. This was not the kind of place he had imagined finding himself in. He had spent his life in solitude, surrounded by cattle and the open desert, but now, the fire seemed to be drawing him into something far bigger than anything he had ever known. The group, a mix of men and women, were dressed in rugged clothing, some of them wearing the familiar attire of the Apache, while others appeared to be traders or travelers. Their eyes studied Jack as he approached, but they said nothing. One man, older than the others, sat slightly apart from the group. His hair was long and silver, and his face was lined with age, yet there was a strength in his posture that immediately commanded Jack's attention. The man's eyes locked onto Jack's with a penetrating gaze, and for a moment, Jack felt as though he was being weighed, measured, as if the man could see into him. Without a word, the man motioned for Jack to come closer. Jack's feet moved instinctively toward the fire, though his mind was still clouded with questions. The older man spoke first, his voice calm but firm. "You are far from home, Cowboy. What brings you here?" Jack stopped a few paces from the fire, unsure of how to answer. "I'm looking for answers," he said simply. The man nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. "Answers," he repeated, his voice thoughtful. "You've found the right place, but answers are not always what they seem." The others around the fire remained silent, watching Jack closely, their faces unreadable in the shifting light. Jack felt a sudden weight on his shoulders, the pressure of their gazes making his throat tighten. "I've been given something," Jack continued, pulling the map from his coat pocket. The firelight danced on the old parchment as he held it out for the man to see. "A map. It's important, but I don't know why." The older man's eyes flicked to the map, and Jack saw a flicker of recognition pass through them. He didn't speak immediately, instead taking a moment to study the map, his gaze lingering on the markings. Finally, he looked up at Jack. "You carry something far more than a map, Cowboy," he said. "You carry the weight of a history you do not understand." Jack's heart raced. What did the man mean? He had known there was something significant about the map, but this was more than he had expected. The man's voice softened slightly. "This is no ordinary map. It leads to something that has been hidden for generations. A secret that could change everything." Jack took a step closer, his curiosity piqued. "A secret? What kind of secret?" The older man's expression grew serious. "A secret that could destroy or save everything we know. But first, you must understand what it means to protect it." Jack's mind swirled with confusion and uncertainty. He had come looking for answers. But the more he learned, the more questions seemed to arise. "What do I need to do?" he asked. The man's eyes softened slightly, and he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "You must choose. Choose whether you will protect what is hidden or let it be lost to time. But know this, the choice you make will shape the future." Jack swallowed hard, the weight of the decision settling over him. He had always considered himself a man of action, someone who faced problems head-on. But this was something different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about something much larger. "I'll protect it," Jack said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty he felt inside. The older man nodded again, his gaze never leaving Jack's face. Then you must be ready. There are others who will come for it, and they will stop at nothing to take it. The fire crackled and popped as Jack stood there, the map still clutched tightly in his hands. He felt a sense of resolve forming within him, but it was tempered by the realization that his life had just changed forever. The desert, the ranch, the quiet life he had lived, it was all behind him now. And whatever lay ahead, he knew he could not walk away from it. The Apache man stood and turned, motioning for Jack to follow. As Jack stepped forward, the others around the fire slowly rose, their faces still unreadable. Jack had made his choice. The journey ahead would be dangerous, but there was no turning back now. He followed the Apache man into the night, the map burning a hole in his pocket, the weight of his decision heavy on his mind. Jack followed the Apache man as they made their way through the night, the darkness of the desert surrounding them like an impenetrable cloak. The soft crunch of their boots on the dry ground was the only sound that accompanied them. Jack's mind was a whirl of thoughts, each more confusing than the last. He had been given a task, but the meaning of that task was still unclear. What secret could a simple map lead to? What was so important that it had to be protected at all costs? The Apache man moved with quiet certainty, his steps unhurried yet purposeful. Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility that had been thrust upon him. He had never asked for this, never wanted to be caught up in something bigger than himself. But now, there was no turning back. As they walked, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It wasn't anything obvious, no flicker of movement, no sound of footsteps behind them, but there was a presence in the air, something that seemed to be pressing in from all sides. Jack glanced around, but the desert was as still as ever. The only thing that moved was the wind, stirring up tiny clouds of dust in the distance. "They are coming," the Apache man said, his voice low but clear. Jack turned to him, his heart racing. "Who?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The Apache man did not answer immediately. Instead, he kept walking, his gaze fixed ahead. Jack followed, his mind racing with possibilities. Who could be coming? And why would they be after a simple map? "The ones who want to destroy what is hidden," the Apache man finally said, his tone heavy with meaning. "They will not stop until they have it. And they will stop at nothing to get it." Jack's pulse quickened. Destroy what was hidden? What could be so dangerous, so powerful, that it could threaten everything they knew? They continued walking in silence, the night stretching on for what felt like hours. The only sign of movement was the flickering of the stars above them, the vast expanse of the desert seeming to swallow them whole. Jack could feel the weight of the Apache's words pressing down on him, the uncertainty of it all gnawing at his insides. He had never been a man of many words, but the silence between them felt suffocating, as though the air itself was heavy with secrets. Finally, the Apache man stopped and turned to face Jack. "We are close," he said simply. Jack nodded, his breath catching in his throat. "Close to what?" The answer remained elusive, hidden in the same shadows that clung to the land around them. The Apache man reached into his cloak and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden figure. He held it out to Jack, who took it without question. The figure was smooth to the touch, its surface warm from the man's palm. It was a small bird, wings spread wide, carved with intricate detail. "This is a symbol," the Apache man said. "It will protect you. It is a reminder of what you are fighting for." Jack studied the figure, unsure of what to make of it. He had never seen anything like it before, but there was something about it that felt important. Something about it that felt right. He slipped the figure into his pocket, the weight of it strangely comforting. "What am I fighting for?" Jack asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. The Apache man looked at him, his eyes unwavering. "You are fighting for the future," he said quietly. "For something that has been lost, something that must be preserved. The path ahead will be difficult, but you are not alone. The land will guide you. And when the time comes, you will know what to do." Jack didn't know what to say. The words felt both reassuring and terrifying all at once. He had always considered himself a man of action, but now, more than ever, he realized that the future was a mystery he couldn't unravel with his own strength alone. As they continued their journey, the desert seemed to stretch on endlessly, a sea of sand and stone with no end in sight. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie light on the land below. Jack could feel it then, a stirring in the air, a sense of purpose that seemed to rise with each step they took. Whatever lay ahead, Jack knew one thing for sure: he was no longer just a cowboy. He was part of something much larger, something that would change his life, and the lives of those around him, forever. The journey had taken them deeper into the heart of the desert, the land stretching endlessly before Jack as the days passed. The Apache man, whose name Jack had not yet learned, led the way without hesitation, as though the path ahead was as familiar to him as his own skin. Jack had grown used to the silence between them, but the weight of their shared purpose hung thick in the air, making it feel as though every step they took was part of a much larger plan, one that neither of them fully understood. They had stopped for the night at a small cave tucked away beneath the jagged cliffs. The fire crackled softly as Jack sat near it, staring into the flames. He had never been one to dwell on things, but something about the Apache man's cryptic words, about protecting something that had been lost, about fighting for the future, had settled deep in his mind. What was he really fighting for? And why had he been chosen to carry the burden of this map? The older man sat opposite him, his back against the cool stone wall, his eyes distant. Jack had long since stopped trying to make sense of the silence. It seemed to be a part of the Apache's way. But tonight there was something different about the air. The quiet felt heavier, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Finally, the Apache man spoke, his voice breaking the stillness. "The time is near," he said. "Soon we will reach the place where the map leads. And when we do, you must be ready." Jack looked up at him, his heart racing. "Ready for what?" he asked, his voice tight with anticipation. The Apache man's gaze remained steady, unwavering. "The future will not be kind to you, Cowboy. But you will be stronger than you think." Jack's brow furrowed, the uncertainty gnawing at him. "How can you know that?" The Apache man chuckled softly, a sound that held no humor, only a quiet understanding. "I have seen many paths, many futures. Some are bright, some are dark. But you, Jack Thornton, you have a strength that will guide you." Jack's pulse quickened. The man knew his name. "How do you know my name?" The Apache man's eyes narrowed slightly, a faint flicker of recognition passing through them. "Your name is not the only thing I know," he said. "But it is enough for now." Jack opened his mouth to ask more, but the Apache man raised his hand, silencing him. "There is no time for questions, Cowboy. Only time for action." Jack's mind spun with confusion, but there was no denying the seriousness in the Apache man's words. Whatever this was, whatever they were headed toward, it was coming fast. The fire crackled as the wind whispered through the cracks of the cave, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. "What happens when we get there?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Apache man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood, his movements fluid and deliberate. He stared out at the night sky for a long moment, then turned back to Jack. "You will know when the time comes," he said. "The land will reveal what is hidden. And you will choose." Jack stood slowly, his legs stiff from sitting so long. The weight of the map in his pocket felt heavier now, a constant reminder of the journey ahead. The Apache man was right. There was no going back. He had made his choice when he decided to take the map, when he decided to follow the Apache into the desert. Whatever came next, he was in it now, fully. "I'm ready," Jack said, the words coming out stronger than he felt. The Apache man nodded once, his eyes unreadable. "Then let us move forward. The future awaits." With that, the two of them set off into the night once more, the fire's light fading behind them as they walked deeper into the unknown, the desert stretching out ahead like a vast, silent sea, waiting for them to make their mark on it. The journey had taken them deep into the heart of the desert, where the landscape seemed to stretch on forever, unyielding and vast. Jack could feel the weight of the map pressing against his side, a constant reminder that his life was no longer his own. The Apache man had said little in the hours since they left the cave, his silence almost as heavy as the desert air around them. Jack had never been one to enjoy silence, but he had learned to respect it in the company of the Apache. The man's presence was calm, reassuring, yet Jack could sense the tension that simmered beneath the surface. There was something ahead, something that was waiting for them, but Jack still had no idea what it was. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the land, the Apache man finally spoke, his voice as steady as always. "We are close," he said simply, his gaze fixed ahead. Jack looked at him, his curiosity burning. "Close to what?" The Apache man's eyes flickered for a moment, but he didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward a distant ridge. "There," he said. "That is where it begins." Jack followed his gaze, his heart beating faster as he saw what the Apache man had pointed out. The ridge was jagged, its peaks silhouetted against the setting sun. It looked unassuming from a distance, but Jack had the feeling that whatever lay beyond it was of immense importance. "What is it?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Apache man turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "It is the place where the future is decided," he said. "Everything that has led us here, everything that will come after, begins there." Jack's heart raced as the words sank in. The future? What did the Apache man mean? He couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. They had walked for miles, following a path Jack couldn't understand, heading towards something he didn't know. And yet, as the Apache man spoke, a part of him felt the pull of destiny, as though the pieces of his life were finally starting to come together. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the desert with it. Jack tightened his grip on the map, knowing that this was the moment he had been waiting for. They climbed the ridge in silence, the sun now low on the horizon. As they reached the top, the land spread out before them, vast and untouched. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he saw what lay ahead. There, in the distance, was a small group of people gathered around a fire. Their figures were silhouetted against the fading light, their faces obscured by the shadows. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. Who were they? And what were they waiting for? The Apache man stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. "This is where it ends," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that Jack couldn't ignore. "This is where you make your choice." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. A choice? What choice? The Apache man turned to him, his eyes searching Jack's face. "The path ahead will not be easy. But you must decide which side you will stand on. The future of our people, the future of everything, depends on it." Jack swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had been thrust into something much bigger than himself, and now he was being asked to choose. But how could he make that choice? He was just a cowboy, a man who had never been involved in anything larger than his own land and cattle. Now, it seemed, the world was asking him to take a stand. The Apache man reached into his cloak and pulled out the small wooden figure he had given Jack earlier. He held it out to Jack, the bird's wings glinting in the dying light. "This is your symbol," he said. "It will guide you when the time comes. But you must be ready. The choice you make will shape the future, for better or for worse." Jack's fingers closed around the figure, the weight of it steady in his hand. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing: whatever choice he made, it would change everything. The fire flickered below them, and the faces around it seemed to watch, waiting for him to step forward. The future was waiting. And Jack Thornton, the cowboy who had once walked alone, was about to make a decision that would shape not just his own destiny, but the fate of an entire world. Jack stood at the edge of the ridge, the wind tugging at his coat as he looked down at the small group gathered around the fire below. His fingers tightened around the wooden figure in his hand, the weight of it grounding him. The Apache man had not given him answers, only questions. What side would he choose? And what would it mean for the future? The firelight flickered in the distance, casting long shadows on the faces of those gathered around it. There was an air of anticipation, as if they had been waiting for him, waiting for this moment. Jack felt his heart beat faster, a mixture of fear and resolve rising within him. He wasn't just standing at the edge of a ridge, he was standing at the edge of his own future. His old life, the quiet ranch, the dusty trails, the solitary existence, felt like a distant memory. In its place was something much larger, something he couldn't fully comprehend. The Apache man stepped beside him, his gaze never leaving the camp below. "The time is here," he said, his voice low and steady. "You must go down there, Jack Thornton. You must speak to them." Jack nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "What do I say?" he asked. The Apache man turned to him then, his eyes piercing. "You will know when the time comes. The land has its way of speaking. You must listen." Jack took a deep breath, the dry desert air filling his lungs. He felt the weight of the map in his pocket, the burden of the secret it held. But now, there was no turning back. He had come this far, and whatever lay ahead, he had to face it. He moved toward the path leading down the ridge, the small group below now clearly in view. The figures around the fire turned as Jack approached, their expressions unreadable. Some of them were Apache, but others looked to be settlers, traders, or travelers, each face marked by the hardships of the land. They waited, eyes locked on Jack as he drew closer. For a moment, the air was thick with tension. Jack could feel every gaze on him, each one heavy with expectation. He stopped at the edge of the firelight, his heart pounding in his chest. "I come from the desert," he began, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "I have been given a map that holds a secret, something that can change the future. I stand here to offer it to you." The silence stretched out, and for a moment, no one moved. Then, one of the Apache men stood, his face unreadable in the firelight. "You offer what is ours?" he asked, his voice low but full of meaning. Jack swallowed, unsure of how to respond. "I offer what I have been given," he said, his voice more firm this time. "But the choice is yours." The Apache man studied him for a long moment, his gaze intense. "The choice has always been ours," he said finally, stepping forward. "But your actions have brought us here. You will stand with us or you will leave." Jack felt his chest tighten. What did that mean? Stand with them? Leave? The future, as the Apache man had said, was not clear. He had always lived his life with the certainty of the land beneath him, but now, in this moment, everything seemed uncertain. "What do you ask of me?" Jack asked, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the decision. The Apache man looked at him, his eyes filled with a wisdom that went beyond words. "We ask you to stand by us. To protect what has been lost, to help us rebuild what was taken from our people." Jack felt his heart race as the words sank in. This was it. This was the choice he had to make. He had come all this way, faced countless unknowns, and now the moment of truth had arrived. The Apache man extended his hand toward Jack. "Will you stand with us, Jack Thornton?" Jack looked at the man's hand, at the fire flickering in the distance, at the faces watching him. The map, the secret, the future, it was all here. And with a deep breath, Jack took the man's hand, his decision made. He wasn't just a cowboy anymore. He was part of something much larger, something that would change the course of history. As the fire crackled, Jack knew that this was only the beginning. The future had begun, and he was ready to face it.